Welcome to Heavy Metal History.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of the podcast. This is a milestone episode for us. We just hit 50 episodes. Pretty stoked about that. Pretty stoked about how the podcast is going. If this is your first time checking this out, we really appreciate it. We hope you keep listening. If you've been with us since the beginning or you've found us along the way somehow, we appreciate the fuck out of all you guys and everybody who listens to us. This episode is pretty fucking special, I would say. It kind of came together last minute. I just on a whim decided to message this person and see if they would say yes to an interview, because they never do interviews. I mean, I can count on one hand how many interviews they've done in the past, like 5 years. You know, they're very not in the public eye, and for many different reasons. But it's really captivating to see and hear a band that like pushes the boundaries of music and social norms, especially in heavy metal. So I was really stoked he said yes. I recorded it a couple days ago, and I bumped everything back that we had planned, and this is now our episode 50. So I'm really, really proud and excited to present episode 50, which is with Matron Thorn of the band Ævangelist. If you've never heard these guys, it's some seriously dense, just brutal death metal mixed with like a wider array of genres in there. It's challenging, and I mean that in a good way, and I mean that as a compliment. Their music stands out from all the other bands in the genre, and they got a good thing going, and he's currently writing a new album, along with a bunch of other projects that he has going on. So it was a really good conversation. It's about an hour and a half. I hope you guys will dig it. And again, if this is your first time checking us out, we thank you so much. Maybe go back and check out some of our other episodes. So with that, here's episode 50, guys. Hopefully, 50 more, 100 more, who knows. Matron Thorn of the band Ævangelist. Alright, guys, so my very special guest this week on the podcast is Matron Thorn, guitar player and all-around general multi-instrumentalist of the band Ævangelist. Thank you for doing this, man. I'm really stoked to have you on.
Hey, it's my pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I know it's pretty rare that you guys do interviews and stuff like this, so I didn't think I had like a chance in hell when I reached out, and I was just like, whatever, the worst you can say is no, so
I think you caught me on a good day.
Hey, yeah, that's good. So the thing I kind of like to start out with, just to kind of get the conversation going, I know you have other musical influences that aren't purely metal, and I definitely want to talk about those, but what are some of your first kind of influences that you remember kind of getting you into heavy metal?
Oh man, let's see. Great question. Really going back, it started with grunge. Grunge was actually sort of my gateway drug for metal. And it started pretty innocently enough with like Melancholy and Infinite Sadness. Then moved up to like the Nevermind, also Fantastic Planet by Failure, and then Super Unknown. And as I kind of went further and kind of explored the realm of grunge in my, I guess, early teens, that's when I got more curious about like what else was out there, because I think I wanted something that was darker than what I'd been previously exposed to. And I had extremely strict religious upbringing, and I was not permitted to listen to metal for a long time. Most of my discoveries of metal occurred inorganically. I'd have to sneak it at a friend's house, or there used to be these stores in the United States, FYE, where you could go and like just sort of scan a CD and like hear a clip from it. Yeah. So that's what I had to do. I had to do for a while. And then I think the heaviest thing I really liked for a long time was Alice in Chains. Alice in Chains is still one of my favorite bands of all time.
That's crazy you mentioned Alice in Chains, because I think out of all of like the grunge bands, they were by far easily one of the heaviest. I mean, Jerry Cantrell's riffs are kind of unfuckwithable in terms of like the heaviness.
Yeah, Jerry Cantrell he's been he is the backbone of the band, and I even like his solo work, like on like Degradation Trip and albums. But yeah, Alice in Chains definitely was one of the heavier ones, and I really kind of related to a lot of it as well. It was also a bit darker than other stuff. I mean, you had like bands like Nirvana, which for better or worse, had seemed like more pop sensibilities, but they still good. But Alice in Chains always just kind of just struck me as there was like something underneath the surface that was a bit darker. I mean, if you listen to a song like "Am I Inside" from I believe that's from Sap, that's it's a dark song. It's very catchy and singable, but it's just you can hear the conviction in Lane's voice. You can hear his sadness, really, and I guess like lots of great things. The sadness draws you in, and it's compelling.
Yeah, I think grunge gets kind of a bad rap for quote unquote killing metal, which I don't really believe was the case. But you mentioned darkness in a lot of those songs. If you look at kind of all those guys in those bands, they were all suffering from different kind of things in their lives, whether it was drug addiction or depression or whatever it may be, and they all eventually died. I mean, Chris Cornell was obviously the last one, but with Kurt and Lane, they died like within a few years of each other. I think like 10 years or something like that.
Yeah.
But, it's in the music. It's in the music there, and you can hear it through the lyrics or, even the songwriting itself. Even like a song, like Rooster, which is fairly soft, has pretty deep subject matter about like the Vietnam War and stuff like that. And that's kind of a heavy song.
Yeah. Also very, very go-to karaoke song for me.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I'd like to also make special mention. Their first album came out in 1998, but the band Vast. This is actually something I didn't get into until like much later, but they are stands for Visual Audio Sensory Theater, and their first album, which is just self-titled, the main guy behind it, John Crosby, recorded it, I think, when he was like 17, and it's so brilliant. It emerged, they emerged as a band kind of around like that sort of plateau where music was good in the 90s, but they didn't really stay as prominent as other bands. But that's highly recommended.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I've never ever heard of them. So anytime somebody recommends music on the podcast, I immediately am like, all right, I gotta check this out when I'm done. So you said what?
It's
90?
kind of like it came out in 98.
Yeah,
and,
okay, cool.
I think you can probably browse and find the album in its entirety on YouTube, and it's just got a picture of like a multicolored eye as the cover, and the logo, and it's something that struck me as almost like a perfect blend of a bit of grunge at times, but also sort of industrial, and there's some of this sort of like maybe like post-pop kind of things going on. It's got a lot of really, really like ahead of its time type ideas,
I love finding albums like that. Yeah, where like maybe not the world, but people just weren't quite ready for that record to be out at that time. But then it gets rediscovered like years later, and people are all over it. It stands to like the test of time with music in general. How often that happens, and
that's largely sort of what the deal was with the band Failure, who were just so underrated for years, but it didn't really click with people until like maybe like just a few years ago. People were just suddenly getting into Failure and discovering Fantastic Planet. I mean, that's a really, really profoundly well written and composed album, and there's so much attention to sonic texture, and it's just so thoughtful how it was very meticulously crafted. It seems like everything has a purpose, and again, that's one I would also highly recommend.
I've heard their stuff. Not like super into them because I haven't like got that crash course of like their stuff yet. But I've heard songs by them by a few people that have like been like, "Hey, you should listen to this." But I'm always listening to so much music. It's gonna take that one song from the band where I'm like sucked in. But I'll have to give them another listen. Check it out.
I'm sure you're familiar with A Perfect Circle.
Yeah.
So on 13th Step, the song "The Nurse Who Loved Me," that's actually a cover of a song by Failure.
Okay.
And
right, yeah.
I actually, I'm biased, but I actually would say I prefer the Failure version of the song. It's much more engaging, we'll say.
Yeah, that's the hard thing about cover songs, man. I feel like you have three waves of cover songs. So you have the ones that do it justice, that are just about as good as the original, but maybe give it a little extra flair, and it's enjoyable to listen to. You have the ones that are so far off from the original, it's like, how did you cover this song in any way, shape, or form? And it's usually pretty terrible. And then you have the ones that make the original seem like shit, and the cover is actually better than the original. So it's a fine line there with cover songs, I think.
Yes, I agree completely. In fact, as an example, I'd probably say like I prefer, and this most people will maybe disagree with this, but I actually do prefer Typo Negative's version of Summer Breeze to Seals and Crofts. I mean, I know the classic's a classic, but I like Typo Negative a lot.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one too. There's something about Pete Steele's voice that makes that song a lot more haunting than ever, could have been on that original song. So it's, yeah. So, you talked about having like a pretty strict religious upbringing. Was that part of the reason that you maybe got like drew into heavy metal a little bit because of that, or was it just something that kind of naturally happened because you wanted that sound?
I would say that the best way to find the devil is to look for God. And when I was younger, I was forced to look for God. And the more I did, the more I was sort of curious about reconciling that whole other side. So I remember actually going to a record store one day by myself, because there was one close to where I lived, and my only goal was to just find just the most satanic looking album cover that was available, and I was just going to take it and run with it. And I made a lot of interesting discoveries that that evening. But yeah, definitely having a religious upbringing is something that gives you a strong appreciation for the devil's music.
Yeah, I can semi relate with that. Like, luckily, mine wasn't like a strict religious upbringing, but I did grow up in the South, and pretty much everybody that you meet or you're around, like, they're just shoving that shit down your throat all the time. So you know, I remember getting beat up in school for, you know, wearing like Slipknot shirts and stuff like that because it was so against the grain here, and it definitely makes you want to like seek that stuff out a little bit more, to be like, well, fuck you, this is what I like, and you know, it doesn't matter if your beliefs. And this is the thing about music too, because I think this is it happens in metal as well. Like you have all these different beliefs because of the kind of music that people predominantly listen to, and it just kind of like fractures it a little bit too much. You know, there's how should I put this? It seems like, especially right now with everything that's happening, there's like this weird division in metal. You know, you have all these people kind of coming out with all these beliefs and ideals, and you know, kind of being chastised for them on the internet, and then you have these people that are like going to stick with them and the band no matter what, and it's like
that's the thing that's happening now, as we've all seen. But I think the best stance to take on that, and I can only speak on my own behalf, but I think that it is better to not choose a side at all. And that's also sort of my approach to life in general, is that, you know, groups of people, regardless of what commonalities you have in between you. I mean, you may be a black person and the person next to you may be a black person, but that doesn't mean that you're in some group together. I mean, everybody on this planet is a completely different animal. And if we all just embrace that, then people would stop just giving such a giant shit about what everybody does. And because everybody's living their own lives and not trying to live up to these absurd ideals and standards that other people came up with, and they're just sort of going along with because it seems reasonable. But there should just be more people thinking for themselves.
Yeah, I do think a lot of it is very much a herd mentality, especially when things get put on the internet. You see so many people jumping on, like, you know, the bandwagons of like hate or whatever it is, you know, just trying to like shovel more shit on the pile, and it builds up really quick. And instead of people just kind of, like you were saying, taking that step back for a second and just being like, well, I don't agree with it, I believe in something different, and that's my kind of stance on it, and I don't have to sit here and type away on my keyboard and be like, this person's a piece of shit because they believe in this, and you're, you know, supporting it, so fuck you too. And it's just kind of, you know, I was talking to somebody the other day about this kind of stuff, and I was like, you know, instead of everybody focusing on what these people are doing, they should all just kind of take a second and focus on their lives. And if it bothers them what these people are doing, cool, go out and make a band and fill the hole where this one's going to leave. Do something about it, you know? Don't focus.
I like the way that you put that.
Yeah. You know, because that band is going to leave a hole, so why don't you go out there and create something to fill that hole? Give something back to the world. Put another piece of art back in there, because that's about the only thing you can do besides sitting there and typing about it on the internet.
Yeah. Everybody has an opinion in 2018, but I think it's much more telling when people keep their mouths shut and just let other people make fools of themselves by attempting to, I don't know, just impress everybody with their platitudes and their moral agenda. I don't have a moral agenda. I just believe that we're all going to die, and that's just where I'm at.
Yeah, you know, that's something, as I've gotten older, that the weight of that kind of just like hits you more and more, you know, because I just got into my 30s, or a little, yeah, I'm 31 now, so it's like the weight of that becomes more apparent, and it's just like, man, I don't have much time left, and I just kind of want to like worry about myself and what I enjoy rather than other people's moral quandaries and hypocritical thinking and everything like that, because it's just like, it's not worth it.
Most definitely. I mean, it's at a certain point. I mean, people with even a shred of intellect, they just sort of outgrow a lot of the childishness of, spending hours reading through comments about what a bunch of jackasses have to say about some crime someone committed or in a band or something.
Mm-hmm.
And not a single goddamn one of those people who does that has the right to judge anybody, because every one of us is a sinner. Every one of us, we've all invented ways of wickedness of our own. Obviously, there's things that are probably universally seen as going too far, and
Yeah.
I'll leave that reference ambiguous, but nonetheless, none of these people they weren't there when it happened. They don't know the circumstances, and I mean, just on that basis of logic alone, it kind of invalidates anything that they may want to say about it.
Yeah, and I think it's because people, they tend to like the drama of it, because metal itself is already pretty aggressive, it gets lumped in as an outsider, it's already like this evil, dark thing. So when you have these people kind of committing these heinous acts, it's just like, it puts fuel on the fire in some respect. But when in reality, it's a very small group of those people that are doing those things, and it kind of mars like the genre as a whole a little bit.
A lot of I guess bands will write music that they say this is definitely evil. This music is occult and it's full of symbols of stuff, and you should believe that we are evil individuals. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, I get it. It's meant to be marketable and it's a selling point, and more power to them. But when you look in the dictionary, evil is defined as the profoundly immoral, and when that's actually exposed to the world and represented and it's in front of your face, you kind of just want to stay in your little your kid gloves and just listen. It's just have music and not reality, because music is meant to be, in a lot of ways, escapism. And I feel like these witch hunts and going and looking for people who whatever, it's counterproductive to making music, to making art, because it brings reality into this situation, and you lose that sense of escapism. Again, I'm not defending anybody's actions or taking any stances or
no,
sides.
Of course not. Yeah.
I'm just saying, the art is the most important thing, and anybody who's ever made great art was definitely profoundly troubled in their personal lives.
Yeah, that's kind of how I look at it too. That's the thing that's kind of always drawn me, not just to metal, but music in general, is that it was that way of escaping from everything. I didn't have to worry about like some redneck beating me up at school when I could go home and just listening to whatever the fuck I wanted, as loud as I wanted. And it was a nice escape from that, and as I got older, it was just like a way to like get aggression out. I didn't have to like be angry at people all the time from like working a shitty 9-to-5 job. I could just come home and blast some death metal and like I'm good to go. Like that's why it's important to me. And I think for some people it gets lost on them. It's not an escapism thing. It's just like I don't know. I've known some people to where it was like a fad.
It's fashionable.
Yeah. That was always interesting to me, is like those people, because I see where their heart is at. It's not like they don't enjoy the music or anything like that, but it kind of was like it got them through whatever they needed to get through in their life at that point in time. That's another way I look at it too.
Yeah.
And then they moved on.
I agree. And like you, I am a Southerner. I'm originally from Florida. I live in Finland now, but I am originally from Florida. And in Florida, at least back then, when I was growing up, there were not people around who were like into metal. I could say that maybe I occasionally would run into some like kids who listen to hip hop, but then because of that, they would consequently like also, and I underline the word consequently, also listen to Limp Bizkit or Korn.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, and I will most definitely admit this publicly, but I think the album Issues by Korn is probably one of the best industrial metal albums of all time. And I'm sure that's going to be an unpopular choice of words, but it is very good. And there were a lot of experiments and things that they did with guitars and the production. It's also got almost no like hip hop influence to it, which, I mean, I'm not like against hip hop or anything. It's just, you know, I don't really like mixing pickles and ice creams. So
Yeah.
but I like them separately. Nonetheless, in Florida, a lot of like real metal was kind of unavailable to me. That isn't to say it wasn't there. I mean, you know, obviously you've got like Morbid Angel and Deicide and all that stuff, but that was actually kind of not in my region. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, which at the time was basically a cultural dead zone. It was a wasteland for art and inspiration and creativity. And I will say though that there was a very small microcosm of individuals in this sort of very experimental, almost outsider art. Sometimes some of it was drone, some of it, I mean, they were people that I'm several of them I'm still friends with. They're all very talented, and they were a really big part of kind of my emergence as an artist myself, because I really admired how, you know, unabashedly, and just how, I don't know, just how, what am I trying to say here? I just admired how just upfront they were about who they are, which is another quality of the South that is respectable.
Yeah, it's really hard. I actually just recently moved back to the South after being away for a number of years, and like I have like purple hair right now, and I can see the looks in people's eyes when they see it. It's just like I know the words that they want to call me, and it's you know, it's like I'm like, it's 2018. Like, how is this still a problem for people? And it just is down here. It's the weirdest thing. If you look different, you're automatically an outsider.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. Did you move from the Pacific Northwest?
I did, actually.
Yeah, because prior to moving to Finland, I was living in Portland.
Okay.
And
yeah,
in Portland, totally different mentality than someplace like Tennessee or Georgia or Florida.
Yeah, I was living in Olympia for the past year and a half, and then before that, the Bay Area in California for like 5 years. And I just moved back to Tennessee, so it's been quite an adjustment, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, going back to what I had said with saying that people from the South just seem to be more upfront about who they are. And I mean, they will let you know that they disapprove of you and don't like you. But in some ways, that's also sort of a good thing, because when I was in Portland, there were a lot of moments where I felt people were not really being authentic. Mm-hmm. I felt like people were very disingenuous. And it's not everyone, but it seemed to be more of a thing there, because, I mean, Portland seemed to be like a destination for people that I guess wanted to go someplace and, I don't know, prove themselves creatively somehow. So you have a lot of people there who say they're artists, and
yeah.
Let me underline the point, they say they are. But
yeah, a lot of people talk but never act.
Yeah. Yeah. There are legitimately some really amazing artists and people doing things that actually make a difference. I knew Jeff Whitehead from Leviathan, and he has a record store there, Devout Records, which is a pretty cool place. And then there's Billy Anderson, who is like insanely good producer, and my friend Mort, who's also an insanely good producer. And the guys in Ritual Necromancy. They were really cool. Panzer God, and I got to know quite a bit of the I guess the metal scene as while I was there.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff Whitehead's one of those guys that I'm really glad to see, like, him doing actual art more, like, especially with what he did with Scar-Sided, doing like all those prints and then selling the originals after that. I want to see more of that kind of stuff in music, and especially with like album releases, to do like all this kind of in-depth art that represents parts of the album. It makes it a lot more special, and it kind of gives other meanings to like what the record's about instead of like face value kind of stuff, having like the visual representation. I think another band that I really like too that also just did that was Converge. Jacob Bannon, he's always doing like these visual representations of like the songs and the album artwork and everything like that. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Jeff is pretty insanely talented. At his house, like I'd seen some of his older works and works he's like in the process of finishing, and I mean, it's pretty intimidating. And don't even get me started on seeing him play drums.
Yeah,
he wouldn't admit it, but he's probably the most elite drummer I've ever seen.
That's crazy. You would think that he would be a little bit more like not open, but just like, I don't know, like letting people know about it. I think that'd be pretty cool. Just being like, yeah, I can just blast away on some drums, no big deal.
I think a lot of the playing that I'd seen him do that I liked the most was more of his. He's got a very jazz oriented, but very creative approach to playing drums, and there's also elements of like hardcore, just very little bit. It'd be really hard. I mean, to describe his drumming is like me trying to quantify love or something. He's just very great, and yeah, it is really to see him do well.
Yeah, I think out of all the instruments, drumming is always the hardest one to explain to people, especially if you're not a drummer and you don't know like the different rhythms and patterns and how to like explain them to people. It doesn't make sense. But on a guitar, you can just be like, oh yeah, well, you do these scales and these chords and this thing, and it's easier to explain. But man, every time I try to describe drumming to anybody, it's just like, well, they hit this one part really fast, or they do this fill this way, and I don't get it. I actually just had to talk to my drummer friend because I was trying to write a review for a record, and I was like, hey man, this part here with like this 30-40 seconds, what part of the drum set is he playing and what's it called? And he was like, he's playing the ride cymbal, and he's doing like I guess the equivalent of like a hammer-on pull-off on a guitar, basically with the stick. And I was like, cool, thanks. So he broke it down for me.
Going back to Alice in Chains, that reminds me, because it's only been like over the past 3 years that I've been playing drums, but in the beginning I didn't have a drum kit at all. So what I had to do was I sort of just got like some pillows, and I kind of just played air drums to Alice in Chains. But then eventually I had the chance to try it out on a real kit, and I had actually become pretty decent at just basically playing nothing. And then I moved on from playing along with Alice in Chains to like playing along with Incantation. And so now, and I did that specifically to work on music for Ævangelist.
Yeah.
We've used Drum Machine at times, and also on our first tour we did. But that actually, it's not. I don't think it's the worst thing. Just kind of, the music has to suit the sound of the drum machine, I feel like, because typically the problem people have with them is that they don't sound like real drums. But I kind of look at it as that's not really the point. I mean, that plasticity and that mechanical precision is something that can be used to, the advantage of somebody who's going to shape the music around those sounds. I mean, sometimes you do want something that doesn't sound quite human and doesn't sound accessible like that. And other times I've just recorded the drums on an actual drum kit myself, and the recordings, you know, they take on an entirely different sort of feeling and form when you approach them with that instead of the drum machine.
Yeah, I don't have a particular problem with the drum machine, to be honest, but it's probably because I like a lot of 80s stuff where there's like nothing but drum machines in a lot of that kind of music.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I pretty much agree with exactly what you're saying. If it serves the sound that you're going for, there shouldn't really be a problem with it sounding like fake or, you know, a little industrial at times. It's, I mean, it serves the song. Why not? That's always been a weird thing with me. Like, especially too, if you don't have access to a drummer, or, you know, or you're still learning yourself, why not use a drum machine? I mean, it's a tool. You might as well use it.
Yeah, and they have some now that are incredibly advanced. And you know, if you spend some very tedious amount of time programming them, you can actually get them pretty decent.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of people like try to like mess around with like drum machines like that, and the amount of work that they have to put into that is way more technically proficient than probably like just trying to learn it yourself and play it. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So it's like, is getting away from the drum machine something you've been trying to do with the band for like a couple years now, or is it still just you're going to use it when you're going to use it, and drums are going to be drums when you need it to?
Yeah, it really only, like I said, it really just only matters what way we're approaching the writing of the music. I mean, the way that the riffs are composed and the atmospheres and everything, it could really go either way. I will say that our next album will have live drums, and these will be recorded professionally in a studio other than my own. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, so you're right now slowly working on the next album. Because I've read a couple places too that at one point in time you did have a whole album's worth of stuff and then you threw it away. Is that correct as well?
Sort of.
Okay.
Originally the album that was recorded, it still exists. So I mean, I wouldn't say that I don't really ever throw out anything. Mm-hmm. It's just that there was another idea that didn't quite lend itself to the same sound as that, and so I sort of took that and ended up just creating an entirely separate album, and that these will both actually be released like kind of like this year-ish. The next album, Matricide in the Temple of Omega, is going to be out some point pretty soon, and we'll make the whole like official label announcement and everything maybe in a couple of weeks here. But it's about 79% finished. All that's left is for me to re-record all of the drums, and then the vocalist Ascaris will finish the vocals. The music though is complete for the most part. There's actually on YouTube right now, I uploaded sort of like a teaser of the album.
Yeah,
it's
I've
one
seen those.
Full song. Yeah. Eon Death Knell is the first song on the album, and this is like track list wise probably one of our shorter albums, but it's only short just in appearance, I guess. It goes well over an hour, and I think it's probably my favorite composition for Ævangelist so far. I mean, it's difficult to even say that because I view all of it as significant, but this one was special because there were a lot of things I that I did here that were different from how I did it in the past. And the idea is always to sort of surpass what I've done before, because I don't see a point in rehashing and recreating Omanek Simulacra or any of the others. Like I said, they're still completely significant, but I feel like what we have with going for us with this album, and it's how it will be interpreted live as well, is something that it stands on its own as being a monument to our achievements as a band so far.
Yeah, I think that mentality that you have there of like always wanting to like surpass the previous records is a good thing to have. And from my perspective, at least, it seems that you are always kind of creatively in the zone, like doing something. Even with that split that you did like 2 years ago. I mean, that was like the one with.
Do you mean the split with Blue House Nord?
Yes, yeah, that one.
Yeah.
I mean, having like a 20-minute track on there, that's got to be no easy feat to just like write a song that long. But then you can immediately go and then write like a 2-3 minute song, no problem. It just seems like there's the thing that I notice about your music is that it's really dense in a good way. I don't mean that as a slight in any way, shape, or form, and it's really atmospheric. And to get all those parts to work in kind of like a harmonious dissonance, that's kind of what I hear in my head. That's got to take some real time and effort. And, taking a shortcut with music like that, you don't want to sit there and just kind of half-ass it, so to speak. You want to always be outdoing yourself. So I think that mentality, that goes a long way, and it kind of shows. Because I feel like with each album you've put out, like, they all sound great, but they've also gotten more technically proficient in sound as they've went on. Especially the last full length you did. That was I wasn't really necessarily prepared for it personally. So when I first listened to it, it took me a little while to be like understanding it, so to speak. It was a very like complex album to listen to and dissect, to get all those like sounds that are in there and to really hear them all.
I appreciate that, man. I think the most interesting part about composing Enthrall to the Void of Bliss was the integration of the harp, which is probably my favorite instrument ever. And it was meant to be something almost like the entire album was meant to be sort of this distortion of beauty and purity, and a distortion of aesthetics that, when considered, they trigger in the mind associations with divinity and the angelic. And I feel like we touch on that pretty effectively. Ascaris's vocals also lent themselves to some very, very interesting experiments, particularly, most notably, I guess, in the song Alchemy, which probably would be perceived by some as being a hip-hop song.
Yeah, I've read that, and I kind of agree, but not so much. I don't know. That's just my opinion on it, though.
Yeah, I mean, generally when I'm working on an album, I'm not really listening to a lot of metal at all. So a lot of the influence of the, the riffs, the way that the songs are composed, everything is, I like to keep it undiluted by any external subconscious or subliminal influences from anything in, I guess, whatever genre of music Ævangelist is seen to be part of. So I think, like, at the time I was listening to stuff like Robbie Williams and Sneaker Pimps, and I was listening to the Mermen, probably one of the greatest surf rock bands ever formed. And Mariah Carey, actually. And I feel like all of this stuff contrasted very well because it enabled me to keep a distinction between the world where my creative process is and, you know, me just casually listening to music as a normal person. I see my creative process as being, as maybe in black and death metal, as cliche as it might even be to say, but it is a very spiritual experience. It's something being channeled through me like a current from a completely separate dimension. And then the music is written through, or perhaps even in spite of me. And if you were to go onto YouTube and, you know, look up Evangelist, you will also find other things that haven't been released on physical formats yet. But I mean, I like to allow people to have instrumental previews of things because with my other project, Benighted in Sodom, sort of the way I felt about it is that most of it is instrumental, because while I like vocals in songs, and obviously there's something to be said for the power in the vocal performances in Evangelist, but having instrumental music sort of allows you to sort of create your own narrative. And it's a way to let people become that much more intimate with this piece of art and not be distracted by trying to discern any messages or any type of spoken input. Because I would say that, you know, anything that I have to say that I feel is truly important is not really something I can articulate in words. It would have to be created as music.
Yeah, that's something I've picked up on generally with a couple interviews I've read and just like listening to the music on my own end. Is it seems very much to me that as complex as the music is, there's also like a lot of underlying like really artistic stuff put into the creation of it. And that's pretty rare these days, I feel like. You know, you have a lot of bands that are just trying to be on an album cycle, and, you know, they're not really trying or putting any deeper meaning into the music they're creating. It's just, they're just making it to make it, you know? There's no passion behind it. Whereas I think a lot of the stuff that you put out, you can tell there's a lot more going on there. And, you know, it comes across in the riffs and the ambience and the vocals, and it's just like, you can't just look at it for face value as like this dense sounding death metal band. There's like a lot more to it. And, you know, you talked about being sort of a conduit for that thing, and I think with any art, it's really important to just kind of let that come out, and the way that you kind of manifest it's very interesting to me, and I think that's why I appreciate it. And I hope that's why most people who listen to your music would appreciate it too, because they can tell that there's something more there than just the music.
I hear a lot from people who've managed to get in touch with me that my music is therapeutic for them. And that's incredibly meaningful to me, because it's therapeutic for me. Mm-hmm. As well as it being in probably the integral part of the basis for what would be known to others as spirituality for me. It's also very much like writing entries in a diary, and maybe even more so, it's me taking scenes from a certain context and rendering them as sound. And when I listen to anything that I've made, it enables me to revisit certain times, certain scenes, certain contexts. Some are real life sort of contexts. Others they lie more in the realm of the transcendent, and it's difficult to even speak about them because they're almost like premonitions that, are manifest as music. Mm-hmm. And in doing so, it's a sort of a double-edged sword because there's music I've written which is, for me, very difficult to listen to because of where it takes me. Some of it makes me time travel, and then I'm suddenly reliving something extremely painful or traumatic. And most of the sadder music that I've made, definitely the saddest music I've made, is in my other project, Benighted in Sodom. Also, the one or two releases that exist by the one project that I have, that it's sort of like dark wave, but with a more new age sort of aesthetic and bent to it, and that's Vagrant Starscape. I would consider that album to maybe be like the saddest music I've ever written, outside of Benighted in Sodom. And then, some of it takes me to places that I can't visit like around other people, because the places may be those sort of nameless, nebulous, and murky, dark places within yourself where you face innate desires and things that better, left unspoken. Mm-hmm. But when you channel that sort of real, just human darkness that's at the heart of every living human being, you can scare yourself. And there's things that are there that people keep inside them, and they've told me that my music enabled them to visit those places safely, visit those places maybe that are so dark that anything but listening to things such as this would require them to act on impulses that would otherwise probably end in some type of, criminal conviction.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess what people would typically call intrusive thought, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, man. I think everybody gets with that from time to time. And, you talk about music definitely taking you to places. It's really hard sometimes to distance yourself from a song that reminds you of a time and a place, because it's weird how a sound can like link a memory and a thought so well like that. It's always intrigued me how that's something our brains just kind of like do automatically.
Absolutely. I think that we are all given these natural sort of defense mechanisms against, certain types of thoughts and ideas that maybe on some kind of primitive level seem compelling or appealing. But when we evolved to develop intellect, to conjecture, we acquired values and a certain range of morality. I can't even really say that everybody has morals, but at least some people they sort of operate on a spectrum of, I guess what would be considered appropriate or decent human behavior. But then again, we could all just be pretending.
Yeah, that's a scary thought, isn't it? You don't know who's out there just like faking, so to speak, being like a regular human being. But that's something I've thought about quite often too, is like, especially we talked earlier about growing up in places that are very religious. A lot of people here make you feel like if you don't believe in God, you're not a moral person. And I disagree with that so much because, I'm not perfect, don't get me wrong. I fuck up like everybody else. But I do know that, I don't necessarily want to, go around killing people. I know that's fucked up and wrong. I don't think about killing people or committing crimes or anything weird like that. But, I've done shitty things in my life just like most people have. And I think the people that want to sit there and be self-righteous are probably the ones that are the most guilty because they can hide it better under the guise of religion or whatever moral compass they want to have with that.
That's true. And I think because they feel like they have this sort of, special club to vindicate their strange choices and evil deeds, then, it's all fine. They don't feel any type of remorse. And that to me is a little bit scarier than, a person who at least is upfront and just does bad things or things that would be considered bad just because they enjoy doing them. Mm-hmm. Because that to me is much more genuine when you're capable of wickedness and that your God will defend your actions later, when that there's penance that can be used to, in a very transactionary sense, command your own sense of reason, then the world opens up a lot more, and you actually become the very thing that you seek to distance yourself from ideologically.
Yeah, I guess I've never really thought about that way, that people do that. It's kind of interesting and messed up, that I guess a lot of people, especially religious people, and I'm sure people listening to this, if you're religious, that's fine. We're not trying to shit on you or whatever, but you got to think that there are those people that, it's so weird that they'll take something they've done and just not worry about it under the guise of Jesus has forgiven me. It's not a big deal. I'll be fine.
Yeah. It's perverse, and it's a very grandiose, very successful type of manipulation. I would say the greatest example of the devil's presence in the world is just Christianity and organized religion in general. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I think that religion is not meant to be shared in the way that people try. I mean, it's not meant to be like a thing. You can share fashion with somebody, but real religion is something that is so deeply personal. It can't be shared with anybody. It's meant to be individualized, and it's, the way that you view the afterlife and view whatever force that you perceive to be present should be purely your decision and your relationship alone. And my personal thought, without going off on a wild tangent, though, is just that if there was a God, it would be unknowable. It would be indifferent to everything that we do, and on a cosmic level, they function as more of the spaces in between all of the atoms that make us all up. I mean, I think rationally, there's a part of me that would think that's how it would be. Yeah.
No, I agree with you there. I can't really say that I think very much different on that aspect of it. Now, with kind of like philosophical ideas like that, does any of that kind of like work its way into writing of the music? Like, do you tend to put a lot of personal thoughts like that in there, or is it just like a separate entity for you?
It most definitely makes its way into the music by all accounts. Even on the level of the actual performances, like of the instruments, when I perform them, there's a state of mind that I enter, and it's usually following a period of reflection. I could say it's meditative, but the entirety of the recording process I consider to be a type of meditative experience. And I feel that when my fingers are on the fretboard, or when I'm playing the drums and I'm creating certain beats, the effect of that sort of trance, it alters me emotionally, and it enables me to get in touch with those authentic sort of gestures as far as, playing the instruments. Oscaris also incorporates her writing and her perspective, and albeit in a much more subtle and allegorical way lyrically, but most definitely on all accounts, our music is given as much attention to those details as possible, because all of it is meant to be completely genuine. And a lot of people aren't even aware, though. When I tell people that I record on my own, they assume that I have like some fancy studio, which at times I've had access to various things and have been privileged to, work with more high-end gear. But throughout my life and the entire time I've made music, I think I've maybe bought a brand new guitar maybe once in my whole life. It's usually been like pawn shops, and it's been hand-me-downs. The first Benighted in Sodom album was recorded on I had gotten a BC Rich guitar from a pawn shop and a little practice amp, and I didn't really know very much about, not as much as I know now, about recording. So it was appropriately being black metal, lo-fi.
Yeah.
But then even with gaining more knowledge and more expertise in mixing and mastering and doing things on a production level, it's still generally just been myself, a guitar, a bass, and a reliable, for better or worse, I guess, laptop maybe. And I'm really not ashamed to admit that, because I've been through a lot of difficult times, like anybody.
Yeah.
But I recall there was music that I recorded in an alleyway, homeless. I had an instrument available to me, and I did have my computer, so I recorded some music just in the alleyway by this crack house, and I wasn't doing crack, but everyone around me was. And it was kind of a strange situation. People were kind of, I guess, intrigued by the fact that I was doing that, just sort of right there, and crouched in between like some overstuffed trash bins and a couple of stray dogs. There's been music I've recorded in the emergency room. If I've ever been able to convince the attending doctors and physicians to allow me to without disturbing anybody, bring my stuff and make music in the hospital. And it's just a lot of different things like that. And I don't feel like it's necessary to, I almost feel like at times it's almost counterproductive to record in like a big budget studio type situation. And, you know, when you create music in environments and situations like that, you tap into some mystical energy that is, it could be profoundly angry or profoundly sorrowful, but you can't really just harness that when you're surrounded by like professionals who are just sort of using tricks to make you sound good, or when you're in this nice cushy place with vending machines and a couch and you're just, you know, I just can't, I've never been able to really see myself doing something like that because it just doesn't seem natural or genuine to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't really think you should like feel bad for just having like a laptop and a guitar or recording in places like an alleyway, because that to me sounds and feels more authentic coming from an artist, that they would record anywhere, anytime, no matter what, because that's when the inspiration is striking, or that's the only thing they have at that moment. And on top of that too, another thing that I've noticed in just doing research for this podcast, you know, when you read about some of these bands that have had these overblown, insane budgets, you know, like $1 million or whatever, you don't hear any difference between the $1 million sounding album and then like the $10,000 or $2,000 or $1,000 sounding album, unless it's a pure like gear level difference. But as far as like studio goes, that's just conjecture at that point. Like nobody's really going to know or hear the difference unless you are an actual like engineer and you can pick those things out. But to the average listener, it's the same. So for me, you know, you recording songs in an alleyway is probably going to be more interesting and more authentic as an artist than somebody who has $1 million sitting in a studio having whoever produce their album. You know what I mean?
You know, I remember hearing about, and nothing against Winter Sun. I mean, you probably know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
But I remember reading about them basically doing like some kind of Kickstarter or something to fund the construction of like this insanely expensive studio. And I mean, the guy's a talented musician he's very technically proficient in playing the guitar, and, you know, no fucking doubt. But it's like when you're that good, I feel like that's even more of a reason to not need any of that shit. Because, you know, let the music speak for your skills. I mean, let it speak for what your intentions are. I don't think I could ever have a Kickstarter or GoFundMe for anything. I feel like it would really misrepresent things. And I mean, what I think is, it's like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Grant Morrison. He wrote.
I absolutely love Grant Morrison. I am.
Dude, I love Grant Morrison. I Batman R.I.P., All-Star Superman, and Final Crisis are probably like my top three. I don't even consider them to be graphic novels or comic books. I mean, there's people who just write superhero stories, but Grant Morrison has applied so much. I can only describe it as just like sentimentality to every aspect of these writings that, you know, it's moving. And in Batman R.I.P., you know, Batman's ultimate villain, Dr. Hurt, essentially seeks to not only defeat Batman, like not in like a haha I'm the Riddler sort of way, but he got very personal. He attacked and defamed like the entire Wayne family. He exposed Bruce's his mother as like a whore and the father an abusive drug addict, and then he sought to break Batman psychologically. I mean, I'm talking like, and I'm sure you've read it, Dr. Hurt breaks into the Batcave and injects him with heroin and crystal meth and then turns him into like an amnesiac drug addict, and he's wandering the streets. And a person who he saved as Batman, when he remembered being Batman, actually was the one to help him now that he was down to his level, this homeless guy. And I mean, I guess where I'm just really, I didn't mean to sort of geek out there, but
no, it's cool. You're speaking my language of that too, man. I'm into it.
I just feel like, Batman thinks of everything. That's what it came down to in Batman R.I.P. No matter what anybody did, no matter how anybody tried to defeat him, he was always prepared. The Book of Changes says the wise man anticipates the evil that is ahead and prepares for it. Superman and All-Star Superman, he said, there's always a way. So you don't need to start a fucking Kickstarter or GoFundMe to get your fans to, pay for a studio for you to be built. And I believe he wanted it built here in Finland, which is just, it blows my mind because Finland is very not cheap.
Yeah.
So it's just, if anything, I just want to give my music and art away to my fans. Like, if there's anybody that my music is helping them get through something, or if my music is really therapeutic or emotionally significant to anybody, I just want them to have it. If I had the ability, and I actually am sort of working up to this, but when I start the record label, I intend to get much of my discography republished, and it'll just, like I said, when it's affordable, mm-hmm. I will absolutely just give music away. I don't really want to take any money for my music anymore. I think it's like, don't get me wrong, it's definitely instrumental in and of itself in enabling me to do what I do. So that's great. And that just equals more music. But as far as I think starting a goddamn Kickstarter to build a fucking studio in Finland is just the most absolutely bullshit, ludicrous thing I've ever heard. But that's just me.
Yeah, no, especially in that case, I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. And there's been other bands too that have started Kickstarters so that they could tour. And, meanwhile I'm sitting there and I've had some experience touring. It's like, if you can't afford to tour and you need to take money from your fans to tour, then what is the point of touring? You know what I mean? And they raised a lot of money. I think it was $100,000 or something. It was an insane amount, and they did it. It's a double-edged sword. I think, if you have a band that wants to go around a record label and just self-release something, and they need X amount of dollars to pay for basically just getting the stuff made, that's fine. Yeah. I can get behind that. That's cool with me because I'm paying for a physical product to be made. But if I'm paying for your studio time or you to tour the country because you can't afford it as a band, I don't feel good giving money to that kind of thing. It's not my personal proclivity to do so. But I also see why other people do, because they want to support the music and the artist, and that is also very important. But I have to say, it's pretty altruistic of you as well to just want to give away music for free, because I think that's needles in the ears for a lot of musicians. What? Giving away for free? No, that's pirating. Already does that to us. Pirating is bad. It's a.
I actually just put all of not all of them. I'd say altogether there's about 75 Benighted and Sodom albums, but there's 25 of them up on the Bandcamp. I just turned 29 not too long ago, and so for my birthday, I just made all of my music on Bandcamp free.
Wow.
And so it's there as well. It's weird to say this, my solo project, but it's rather the project that is, I guess, my namesake. So the music that I just released as just under the name Matron Thorn, there are 2 releases on that Bandcamp that are completely free. The Vagrant Starscape album is free. And anything else that I, can come up with. I was actually even considering putting online, because people have asked me about it over the years, but like the very first Benighted in Sodom demos, and then the music I made before that band, which was like, I was in high school. I was like 14 when I started Midwinter Storm.
Wow.
And for that project, there's probably about 30 albums that I made. It's like, it's pretty lo-fi, but it's listenable. I feel like it is. I go back to it every once now and again to just kind of get nostalgic. But I was thinking about putting some of that stuff online too, since people have asked and wanted to hear it. But I mean, we'll see. And I'm just grateful for anybody who, anybody who takes the time to appreciate anything that I've done on this planet. Cause I am definitely not cult or true or any black metalisms. My black metal privileges were revoked years ago. And, before we started this call, I was listening to Seal. And I'm sure I'm the only person for miles in Finland right now who's listening to Seal on this snowy day.
I mean, if it makes you feel better, I was listening to Queen earlier this morning too. So,
oh, nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely just one of those days where I was up a little bit early getting ready for this, and I'm not in that mood yet to like listen to metal. So I was like, some Queen, that'll do it. Like we'll just listen to that, and it's like one of their albums that people really don't necessarily like in terms of their whole discography, but I think is pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. I love Queen. I'll listen to that and David Bowie all the time. I don't know,
man.
Because like I know this is a metal podcast or whatever, but I think one of my favorite things for most people that I speak to is that a lot of people who are in metal or write metal or whatever, they're very, very open to music. Yes, there is that subsect that are very, they had that elitism thing and they don't want anything outside of metal, and that's okay too. But I really enjoy talking with people that have varied tastes in terms of like musical stuff, because I always feel like if you aren't listening to everything that's available, you're really depriving yourself of a lot of enjoyment, not just in life, but just in general, like especially with music, because there's so much music out there. You really should give everything that you can a chance and listen to it, because you might find something that you like that isn't necessarily, your taste, but it just serves that purpose that it needs to serve,
I completely agree. And you had mentioned 80s music earlier, and that was actually what my mother brought me up on, like Tears for Fears, The Cure, Aha, the Bangles, stuff like that, which I still love. I still love all of that. And then, because I was most definitely a goth throughout high school, so that was kind of when I was able to get into more like Bauhaus and Susie and the Banshees, and I went through all of that too. Even and again, unpopular opinion time here, but there's even country music that I really super dig, because first of all, many of those guitar players are absolutely untouchable. Yeah. They're so fucking good. And if you're not listening, and when I say country music, I'm not referring to like what you'll hear on the radio, like Jason Aldean or anything like that. I'm talking about like Western things that are cinematic in sound. It's less about, getting your woman, your gun, and your truck back, but more like about being on like cattle drives and, living that life as sort of like a cowboy, basically. And I've known actual cowboys, and they've introduced me to some pretty awesome music, and pretty fun times as well. And you mentioned Queen. It's interesting. I went to karaoke with some friends last night, and they all A few of them sang Queen, from what I remember, and usually my go-to songs at karaoke are Chris Isaak's "Wicked Game." That's like usually the one I start with, just to kind of let everyone know who they're dealing with.
Yeah.
And yeah, then Heart-Shaped Box by Nirvana, then Rooster by Alice in Chains, then If They Have It, Wood by Alice in Chains.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah, Black Hole Sun, a lot of the hits, because I like doing ones that people know but have probably never heard like an actual American sing them, and I get some pretty positive reactions out of people when I sing. I enjoy singing a lot.
Is that something you would ever consider doing as like another musical project, as being like more of a front man?
It's something I've wanted to do for a long time. I'm starting a new project here in Finland, and I guess this would be a good time as any to just sort of make an announcement about it. But
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, it's called, and I was actually pretty surprised that this name had not been officially taken by any active bands, but it's called Devil Worshipper. And the only way I think I can describe it is sort of, I guess, imagine Evangelist plus something like Dick Dale and the Deltones, who made Misro Lou from Pulp Fiction.
Yeah.
With just a little bit of Nine Inch Nails thrown in for good measure. So very menacing but engaging, but also very menacing music. And I intended to be the front man. Now, in this case, because of how many members they're going to be, I may also be playing guitar. But my goal with this project is that all of us are contributing. It's not just me. Mm-hmm. And, my main role is just sort of the overall composer, sort of the visionary, and then being the lead singer. Yeah, so it'll be, we'll start recording sometime within the next 6 months. I'm also, I can't really say too much about this, but aside from finishing the Evangelist album, and this I can tell you that it is related to Evangelist in a very big way, but I am also going to be shooting a movie.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because I figured at this point, it's only logical that the next phase in the evolution of our band for Evangelist is that we're no longer just making albums, but we are also making short, psychologically disturbing films.
Okay, so adding a visual element now, that's very, very interesting, because, the music video is very surely a lost art form in some respects, because there's no channels. It's all on YouTube now. And I don't think a lot of people are funneling money into music videos very much. Yes, they still get made, but yeah. I think it's a lost art form, and I don't think a lot of bands put a lot of thought into them. And I know you said it was more of a movie and not necessarily a music video, but I think having a visual component is very important for the music.
Yes, I would look at it as more as like a sort of a visual representation of a non-linear fever dream. Mm-hmm. It'll be very, I guess to put it plainly, it'll be very abstract, and something that I feel won't violate the ambiguity that Evangelist, takes advantage of, in the sense that, psychologically, the part that makes the music scary is that it affects you on that deeper level that only you know about. But it's indefinable, and if it's represented visually, it has to be extremely nebulous, and there won't be anything that is stated outright. But again, that's about the extent of what I can say about it right now.
That's I totally understand.
But I can say also that at the very least, probably by maybe September, maybe October, at the earliest, we will unveil the first promotional, movie poster.
Okay. Nice.
And I'm expecting everything to be done with that, at least, probably by the end of 2019. But that could actually get moved up. It just sort of depends. It's it'll be a big step for us and for myself as an artist. But I have a feeling that it should get a few people's fingers on their keyboards moving, I think.
Oh shit! All right. You spoke a little bit about ambiguity there. Something I've noticed. Why do you think it is people on the internet and journalists specifically focus on the fact that you two in the band aren't very, like, I guess, I don't know how to word it, like, open or out there in the public eye? Like, why do you think they focus on that more than the music? Because I don't really think it's terribly important that you guys aren't out there, like, as, like, the face of the band. Like, it is what it is. If you let the music speak for itself, the members don't really have to be there. So I think it's kind of interesting to me seeing how many people just focus more on that than anything else.
Well, I think that is a attempt by people to humanize us, because because the music, as I said, when it comes from the places that it does, it affects people. And when you don't necessarily put your ego in the forefront of what you create, they're forced to draw their own associations, draw their own conclusions about what exactly something means. Mm-hmm. And I think that makes it more potent, because usually the conclusions that people make for themselves are the ones that linger with them the longest, and they reflect on them, and they revisit the music to reinforce those associations and those conclusions that they came up with. So, when you're there putting your face just everywhere and just showing people, hey, I did this, then it becomes less about the potency of what you've created and more about the individual. And I wouldn't want to be I wouldn't want to be like Eric Danielson or something. I mean, he does like a lot of video interviews and talks about his ideology, and mm-hmm. And they're very, they're like on the black metal red carpet, basically. But if I were to walk down the black metal red carpet, I'd want to be wearing like a Kermit the Frog costume.
Yeah.
And honestly, I feel like that could probably work for Watain too.
I mean, that's something too that is also kind of in the genres. I think a lot of these members take themselves a little too seriously, trying to be like quote unquote true. Do you think that's important? Like, should that really matter, or should the music just kind of matter more than that? The whole thing about, I don't know. The mentality behind a lot of that is it confounds me and it interests me at the same time, you know, like always trying to be like the truest person in black metal and taking the band and the visuals and everything super, super serious. Or
I would say that the truest people, if I were to consider them that, would never ever tell anybody that they think of themselves as being true. And
yeah.
And I feel like, especially in black metal, it's so elitist at times and so competitive, and I don't understand it. I don't understand why any of that shit actually matters, because regardless of what God you serve or what your ideology is, you're flesh and blood too, man, and you're. Yep. All it takes is for someone to approach you in an alley and put a 38 to the back of your head and blow your fucking brains out. And then all of that worship and reverence has just amounted to exactly what just happened. And I mean, I don't necessarily think that everybody who has that sort of deep type of reverence for whatever and who takes themselves that seriously, I don't think that everybody's necessarily phoning it in, but I think a lot of people are. I mean, I'm no one to judge and I'm not diminishing anybody's perspective or spirituality or mysticism or anything. And like I've said, I mean, I am probably the most non-black metal person in black metal. I have literally nothing to offer anybody who's just like straight up, brought up on like Judas Priest or Merciful Fate or shit like that. I mean, I was forbidden to listen to stuff like that when I was growing up. And there's a huge difference between, growing up and being among the Norwegians in the scene and starting this band in Uppsala in Sweden versus somebody who went to Catholic private school for like first 10 years of their lives in a ghetto in Fort Lauderdale, Florida.
Yeah, it's a huge difference, and I think that weird cultural divide between like America and Norway, especially in black metal, is like another weird thing, because a lot of American black metal bands get shit on for not being true or whatever, and it's just like, well, they're playing the same kind of music, like why does it matter what continent they're from, It's so they didn't burn down a bunch of churches. It doesn't matter.
I think if anyone considers me to be untrue because I my band is American or for whatever reason, if anybody considers me to be that, that's awesome, because that means that I'm an original. That I don't want to be. If everyone else is true, that's exactly what I don't want to be. I want to just go my own way and just be true to what's in my heart. And what is in my heart is, it's probably not true. It's true is a pejorative in that sentence there. But what's in my heart is just the music that I make. And I generally even try to avoid, referencing anything I create in the terminology of genres and stuff like that, just because that would be me subscribing to some classification that someone came up with. And again, that is just another attempt by people to humanize the things that they liked, because it's not good enough for some reason for people to love things and respect them for what they are. They need to involve themselves in trivial aspects of, the person's life who made it. I mean, like, I don't really have anything to hide, but then again, I probably do. But if anyone really wanted to know what I ate for breakfast this morning, it was some cold pizza, and it was awesome. So I have really nothing to offer anybody who's seeking like someone like. I'm not an Eric Daniels. I'm more of like a Mr. Rogers.
Okay. I think that's more genuine than anything, just being yourself. I think I know for me personally that goes a lot longer of a way than somebody like putting on a facade, or even if it's not a facade and that's who they really are. And that's fine too. It's everybody's different. That's kind of, like what we were talking about earlier. It's just really interesting to me, seeing like those weird divides with personalities and stuff like that, and especially
Absolutely.
in metal. Because you get a magnifying glass put on you if you're different in any way, shape, or form. It's the weirdest thing.
And again, I don't say any of this to seek to denigrate anything about what anybody else does. I can't speak on my own behalf.
Mm-hmm.
I can only speak for my art and what it is, and if people are into it, great. If not, that's fine too.
Yeah, and I think that's how it should be in general. That's as I've gotten older, I used to be like pretty close-minded about that stuff, and if somebody didn't like the same things that I like, I'd be like, well, I don't like you. Now I realize how stupid that was, and it's like everybody likes different stuff, and if somebody likes something different than me, fine. Maybe we can find something else to kind of be like-minded about, and even if not, so what? That's fine with me too. I'm just worried about like liking what I like, and like you were saying as well, just being true kind of to myself. And I think that's how everybody should be. They should be true to their own selves, no matter how unabashedly weird or whatever they are,
Yeah, I mean, people should resist the temptation to accept doubt and judgment from anybody, and just absolutely approach your existence as though every breath that you take were precious and sacred.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I agree. It's I know I keep talking about this, but like the older I get, I keep looking back on things that I used to think a lot differently now, and I realize, I guess I feel like I'm growing up more now, and it's kind of interesting to me that I've like recognized that in myself. It's the weirdest thing, because sometimes inside I feel like I'm 15 still.
Yeah,
but,
most definitely.
Yeah. So I guess kind of a couple last things here. I don't want to keep you forever, but this has been such a great conversation. Where do you kind of see the future of heavy metal going? Because this is something we bring up a lot in the podcast, like doing these history episodes. You see the genre evolving into all these different sounds and genres and subgenres, if you will. Do you think it's in danger of eventually becoming kind of stagnant and derivative with no more growth? Or do you think it's still a possibility that the genre can still evolve into different sounds? And I hate using the term subgenres, but I guess for lack of a better term, a subgenre.
Well, what I think is there'll be two scenarios, and only one of these will happen, or one will happen and the other may happen much later. But usually before there's a renaissance, there's usually a period of either intense stagnation or something occurs where the music itself grows beyond, I guess we could say, legal limitations, and it becomes literally illegal to create black metal or death metal or anything like that. So in the event of that, people will start breaking rules to create music, to create this music again. People will start to do things covertly and not out in the open. There won't be any discussion of this sort of thing on message boards anymore, and people won't be so quick to judge all of it because they knew what was at stake for it to be made.
Okay. Yes. I watched a documentary not too long ago about this guy who he made black metal in his country. If they find out you make heavy metal, they basically put you in jail. So that's a pretty intense thought that could be a thing at some point. And who knows? Yeah, that could be one outcome, which is terrifying to think about.
It's both terrifying and, in my opinion, a little bit liberating, because what it says is that an individual that is in those circumstances would be daring enough to risk their lives just to create art. That would make the outward perception of it so different from, how it is when, as I said earlier, when a band is just freely able to take a bunch of money and go to a studio and record an album, get a really fancy artist to create this elaborate cover. And I mean, I'm not saying anything against all of that, but I'm just saying that in the future, in order for, this music to get strength again, it's got to sort of suffer a little bit. It's got to receive that, like what you were saying about the person that where it's legal for them to make the music. There's got to be some adversity. It's got to stop being so easy, because then that's going to eliminate the people who aren't passionate about it and who aren't willing to, take that risk to create it. And what will be left are the people that are.
You know what? I think that is an excellent sentiment to kind of wrap up on. That was perfect. Yeah, so I guess the last thing, man, if there's anything you want to let the listeners know, or we'll link to everything on our website once we get the episode going, but just anything you want to let anybody know before we go out here.
No matter how well you feel like you've packed to move to Finland, you haven't packed well enough.
Oh man, that's awesome. That is awesome. All right, so we're gonna leave it off with that, guys.
Be excellent to each other. And party on, dude!